people, and welcome to the About That podcast with me, your host, your favorite geek psychologist, your favorite pop culture enthusiast, your favorite queen of the nerds, Dr. Vanessa Hintz. And welcome back to all of those who consumed the fire that was the first conversation that Dr. Carlton Green and I had concerning the film Soft and Quiet. Welcome to part 2 of said discussion. I hope you all enjoy it, as it will hopefully be as fruitful to you all as it was to us in our discussion. Without further ado, please enjoy.
What was that like for you?
Yeah.
Right? Be in a relationship to be in a loving relationship with a white person, and then to be thinking about how that person, still embodies whiteness that
Yes.
and you've been watching this white violence play out.
Yes. And I would say too that for me, and those of you who have listened to the podcast, and if you haven't, episode 1 is when I tell my origin story. But not only am I married to a white man, my mother is a white woman, a whole white woman that probably in her life in the past and currently has engaged in a soft and quiet way, regardless of the fact that she has biracial Black children. You know what I'm saying? Because that is the way of America, right? That is the way that she is a white woman that's probably more than likely been socialized as a white woman from Indiana. You know what I'm saying? Like Indiana. Let me just say that again, Indiana. But nonetheless, I think that for me, there is, even as someone who does DEI work, as someone who is, I would argue, has an expertise in race and racism and dynamics of oppression, privilege, racial identity, it is still very, very difficult for me to confront that proximity to whiteness that I have, right? So when I watch a film like Soft and Quiet, and I know I don't want to talk to my husband about it, I don't want to talk to my mom about it, because it's going to get to a place where it's going to be uncomfortable. And I don't want to do that, right? Like, I don't want to, like many people who experience power and privilege, I don't want to acknowledge that they are maybe part of the problem. You know what I'm saying? And that's not a shade. I love my husband. I love my mama. You know what I'm saying? That's not a shade. I think it is, again, part of what makes it so scary to me is my proximity to whiteness is not only am I biracial, not only am I light skinned, not only am I married, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's different. And I think that there is also a sense of responsibility that I feel like, damn, am I part of the problem? And I think that that is what, for me, made it not only difficult to watch this period, but also difficult to, like, I didn't even ask my husband if he wanted to watch it with me. I know I didn't want to watch it with him, because when we watched Get Out together, it was awkward and weird. And I was like, let's just not do that again. Okay, let's just not do that again. He lasted like 3 episodes of Lovecraft Country. I was like, let's just not. Like, let's just not. And sometimes I think about, is that wrong? You know what I'm saying? And that's when I feel like I have to reflect myself. I have to engage in conversations with trusted, confidants about the way that I feel about that, because it is a very real thing that I, as a Black person, a biracial Black person with a white mother, a biracial Black person with a white husband, have to confront, even though it's difficult, right? And sometimes I feel like I don't have the capacity to do that. And then watching this film, I didn't feel like I had the capacity to do that afterwards. I just was depleted. Like, my soul was depleted. And I was like, you know what? No. What I'm gonna do is just send them this episode and be like, y'all should listen to this. And that's gonna be that. Like, that's what we're gonna do. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's interesting to hear you talk about it. I appreciate you sharing those reflections, like, which are very deeply personal for you and your family and the relationships that you have. The things that were coming to mind for me, especially thinking about being in the DEI space, that I would want folks to be considering, but based upon this personal story that you're telling, but still trying to think about what they could mean, is that there are ways that all of us get socialized to protect people with power, right? all of us actually get, especially as people of color, we get socialized to make sure on some level that we don't upset white people,
Yes.
that we don't discomfort white people, because in this film we see it playing out, but across history as well, right? If we think about the Tulsa race massacres, right? White people were uncomfortable with the progress that these Black communities were making, or with this particular Black community. Their discomfort, right, is what actually led to them executing that racial terrorism. And we see that across so many aspects of American history. That and so, like, as people of color, as Black people in particular, we are can oftentimes be, for our own survival, we can collude and not necessarily upsetting white folks, right? I think that the thing that I would want folks out in the world to be thinking about, right? Especially if you are trying to do any type of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, or racial justice, or even gender justice, or any of those types of pieces, is that you be asking yourself, right? Am I operating here in a way that is actually prioritizing the comfort of people with power, right? If I am operating in a way that is prioritizing the comfort of people with power, like I'm saying things like, oh, the boss is really kind and the boss takes care of us. Or if I say, oh, this could make the boss sort of like not look so good, right? Or the boss can't do everything. There are these other constraints around, right, how things can get done. If we're actually prioritizing the comfort of the person with power, we're not doing diversity, equity, inclusion work.
Mm.
I was just saying this to somebody the other day. The boss is a whole grown human.
Say it.
They need to be able to, they get paid to take feedback.
They get paid.
They get paid to take feedback.
Paid.
And so if that person is so fragile, right, so demure that they can't take, like, hey, you're doing something that feels harmful, you're doing something that is not necessarily helpful to the organization, or in some ways, if your relationship is dependent upon them always being comfortable, right, you aren't going to be getting any real type of work done, right? I know we're kind of digressing a little bit, but as you were talking about it, it made me think about those particular dynamics that, especially as people of color doing this work, I would say, especially as Black women, right, doing this work, there are ways, of course, that Black women have to be thinking about protecting themselves in a racist, sexist system. Mm-hmm. And so they have to be strategic about when and where and how they speak up, right? But what I know is that so many Black women who are doing this work in earnest are still doing the speaking up, right? Without prioritizing or centering the comfort of white folks, right? And so, right, so the challenge becomes for us to be asking ourselves, am I not speaking up because I actually need to protect myself here, and that is my main focus? Or am I not speaking up because I'm actually protecting the comfort of those with power?
And something that I want to talk about too, because again, it was inherent in the film, and I think it would not only be useful to me because I'm absorbing all of this word and this knowledge. Okay, I'm about to pass the plate in a second, but what I think would be interesting to talk about is what happens when you do speak up in spaces. And so we saw in the film when the violence was ensuing, right? We saw this confrontation that happened in the grocery store, and we saw the younger sister. So there was the woman who was a victim of sexual violence and her younger sister. And the younger sister was about that life, okay? She was about to get
about that life.
She was yelling. She was like, you know what I'm saying? She was with it, right? And in the course of this violence that was happening during this home invasion, we heard these white women say things like, this is all because you sassed us. This is all because you decided to stand up for yourself. You did this to yourself. You resisted. You fought back. It would have been easier if you would have just stopped and showed us respect. And so I would argue that is like the gaslighting, right, that people of color experience. You're causing division because you're bringing these things up. You're making it difficult because you're bringing these things up. If you would just be quiet and go with the program, everything would be fine. What would you say to people who are hesitant to speak up in these spaces, as you mentioned, who are hesitant to make those in power uncomfortable because of this gaslighting that may occur because of this, because it may be difficult for them, right? Like, what would you say? Because again, to me, that hit way too close to home, that part of the film, because as someone who has, I'm a tourist, okay? But as someone who has always been the person that's like, excuse me, like raising my hand and speaking up, how many times have I been told you're the problem? How many times have I been told everybody else is cool with it except you, Vanessa? So you must be the problem. How many times have I internalized that? It must be me because everybody else is cool with it. What would you say to people who are dealing with that, and that sort of is part of the reason that they're hesitant to speak up and speak out?
Mm-hmm. Oh, can we hold your question for just a moment? Because
Yep.
I really want what you just shared to
Yes.
settle a little bit,
Yes.
right? Because I think that that's also what this movie is about. The main character says at the very beginning of the film, I'm going to quote her, as they're talking about how to potentially create a newsletter where they can share their ideas about the daughters of the Aryan, whatever that thing is called, right?
Daughters of Aryan Unity.
The daughters of Aryan Unity. And so they're talking about how to get the word out. And she says, we can't come on too strong, soft on the outside, so vigorous ideas can be digested more easily. We are the best secret weapon that no one checks at the door because we tread quietly, right? So you get this notion that white women get to be created, depicted, like there's a whole narrative around them of being soft and quiet, right? This is how power functions in organizations. The soft and the quiet ones are not perceived as the ones who would be doing anything violent or would be doing anything treacherous or would be doing anything that's harmful because they're soft and quiet, right? I think a part of what you're putting on the table is, or the right, I guess the piece that I really wanted to underscore is that that is one of the ways that power functions in organizations, right? Because also, if we're going to depict white women as being soft and quiet, then that also means that we have to depict Black women, and I'll use them in this example, right, as like being aggressive, as being demanding, as being uncouth, as being loud, right? Everything almost in some ways as being the antithesis or the opposite of this white woman, soft and quiet purity, if you will, right? And so there is a piece of this that is about recognizing wherever you find yourself working, wherever you find yourself engaged, right, with people in any types of efforts, to recognize that that's a part of the narrative that's there, right? And not only is it a narrative that's there, but it's a narrative that white folks are invested in, right? They're really comfortable with being able to see white women these ways, which actually sets up part of the issue. If we perceive them as being soft and quiet, then we don't perceive them as having power, right? When in all actuality, and this is a part of what the movie is helping us to understand, they operate with tremendous power.
Yes.
Right? Power that oftentimes goes unchecked. And if it goes unchecked, it will have disastrous results. Right? And people really need to be thinking about taking that whole metaphor in, or maybe it's not in a metaphor, taking that narrative in from the film, because that is really what we're dealing with, right? To your question, right? So folks need to protect themselves, right? Because they can be harmed by acting against this narrative or speaking out against this narrative or challenging it, whatnot, right? Here's what I would say, and this may be going like too quickly, but I hear Audre Lorde, your silence will not protect you.
Bloop.
Right? Audre is very clear. You weren't meant to survive in the system anyway. So if you're going to be silent, they're going to kill you. If you speak up, there's a possibility that they could kill you, right? But the fact of the matter is that learning how to name the dynamics that are occurring in a particular space, learning how to bring or learning how to facilitate awareness of those dynamics. So maybe it's not even you Who has to always bring attention to those, right? How do you create or how do you align with other people such that there are coalitions of you who can speak up about some of these dynamics? Because again, what we see in the film is that when white folks get caught up in whiteness, they can become really, really extremely powerful and disastrous, right? What we know is that one lone voice in these types of situations is probably never going to be the voice that's going to stop it from moving forward. That's why you have to build coalitions. You have to build alignments with people in order to be able to bring some attention. And again, maybe it might not be your voice that is literally speaking out, right? If you can align with other people and have them speak out, that helps. It goes a long way with regards to potentially not being the target of the soft and quiet terrorism, right? But let's be clear, even if you are in alignment with people, I know I've had this experience, right? Even as a Black person, being in alignment with a multiracial group that's trying to speak out, there are ways that people still target me, the Black person, with their terrorism, including other people, right? It's soft and quiet, whiteness, white femininity functions and grows the way that it did, the way that it does, because one of the ways that it continues to grow is that it will depict Blackness, right, as this dangerous, violent force. It's sort of like gets to offload all of its violence onto us, right? It projects it all onto us so that it can remain soft and quiet and pure.
And that takes us right back to the sort of inspiration behind the film. What did Amy Cooper do? She projected her violence onto this docile Black man who was watching birds in Central Park. And she is the one actually, because again, she knew what calling the police would do. She knows what calling the police on a Black man in America means, right? Like I think we all know what that means, right? And so I think that what you just said, and something else that you just said, I think is important to underscore. Soft and quiet people in the world are not always white women.
Well, then there's that. Then there is that.
There's and that's one thing that I feel like when we're in the DEI space, part of what, and I would say, I wouldn't even say just in the DEI space, when we're having conversations about race, period, right? Part of one of the defenses that we see is that, like, well, I'm white. What do you want me to do about that? I think they sort of talked about it in the beginning in the church, the meeting scene, right? And I think it's important. This is something I say in a lot of my trainings. Racism is not about people, it's about systems. Whiteness is a system. And so I think that when it's important to understand that soft and quiet is about a system of whiteness, not just because you're a white person, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that. And I think that that again is something I think in the film that we saw perpetuated, because as this escalated, you saw that this was sort of like a group system. It was a system that was operating, you know what I'm saying? And that's what I think that the film did. I think that it just, and again, is what makes it horrifying. Absolutely horrifying, because if this is a system that is all around us, where do we turn for solace? Where do we turn for relief? How do we cope? And I think that to me, again, is why I ain't never gonna watch this movie again, because I don't want to be reminded of that. I'm already reminded of that all the time, every day. You know what I'm saying? And I think that just a sort of horror nerd moment, let me just have this moment to myself, in terms of the way that the film was shot, right? Like, this film was shot entirely in one uninterrupted take. So it was almost like there's a camera. It's not like found footage, like the camera's moving all around like Blair Witch Project. It's one uninterrupted take. So there's no stitching of frames. Literally, it's like a camera is following these people. So I think that's another thing that makes this movie so frightening, is that unlike a movie like Get Out, there is never any relief from the horror, because it is one uninterrupted take. There's never let's pan to these trees. There's none of that. It is one uninterrupted take, which I think is such a beautiful yet horrifying comparison or sort of analogy, metaphor, I don't know the word, to racism. It is one uninterrupted take throughout life.
racism is relentless.
Mm, mm,
It
mm.
doesn't actually take a break. It doesn't go on vacation, right? The evil of racism, right? The treachery of racism is that it is so relentless and ever present, right, with us. As you were talking about it, that's the part that was coming to mind to me as well. And I think that the other thing that really sort of like plays out around this one continuous would you say continuous
Take
take, right, is that at the center of that continuous take really is the main character, Emily, this white lady, right? It
all
is really
statuesque. Mm,
tall, statuesque, described as Barbie,
mm.
right, in the film, described as a model. Like there are ways that we are putting this particular white woman and this type of white woman on a pedestal, right? And the camera is really following her,
Mm,
right? I mean, it is such a really interesting way of thinking about how it is that we pedestalize white women,
mm.
right? And there are ways in this movie, right, around white men that we get sort of like white women dictating white male behavior, right? White women informing white male behavior, white women sort of like putting white men in check,
Ooh,
right?
ooh.
Around sort of like how they're behaving or being in the world. But there is, right, and I think again, this is one of the reasons why people need to be watching the film. This is one of the reasons why white women need to be watching the film and really thinking about and asking themselves, how do I do this? How am I participating in this?
Yes,
Right?
yes, yes.
At one point, this white woman is trying to, Emily, the main character, says things really about the sanctity of white malehood, right? And about how it has been such a strong and rich resource, right, for white women. And there's a way that she's trying to honor them.
Mhm.
And then she turns around and completely emasculates her white partner. Like
Talking to him all kind of crazy.
she uses all of the words, right, that feel like they would really reduce a man, a white man, what maybe a white cis man, right, white cis straight man, to just
Yes,
nothing,
yes.
right? Um,
Okay, come on with the critical analysis. Whoo, whoo. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Please be sure to join us for the next episode that will feature the epic conclusion to this discussion between two dope black psychologists about the film Soft and Quiet. Until then, I wish you and your families safety, health, and joy. Until next time, beautiful people.